Hey friends, this is Joseph Maynor. So, welcome to my new video. I wasn't going to make a video today, but I decided that I probably should because I saw that people have done a lot of work recently, and I'm kind of drawn to react to that work naturally, being somebody who's interested in this work. And I think the elephant in the room is that don't focus on the argument, focus on who's making the argument. What role is the person in who's making the argument? See, we're taught in science and in philosophy to look at the argument as if context doesn't matter. We can just look at the language, we can use logic, try to analyze the argument in that way. But I think it's actually more important to look at who's making the argument and what role that person is in. What are they trying to preserve? So power is more important than truth on some level, not in every level. But when it comes to external influences, you have to see that something coming from the other, even something coming from you, has a tinge of power in it. For example, I'll give you a thought experiment. Think of all the ways that you've wanted to change in your life. How many of those ways have you actually effectuated? Yet you want to have the audacity to tell other people that your perspective on reality is superior to every other perspective that's here, and that they should listen to you because you're a teacher, right? I'm a teacher, not the student. You designated yourself to be a teacher too. See, that's already very suspicious. And, one of the things that I want to say is that being a teacher, like I've said in my last video and other videos, it gives you a strong incentive to want to be right. And that's intuitively obvious to me. I mean, you will give lip service to people who disagree with you, but ultimately you're trying to persuade people that you're right and that you should be listened to, that you should be followed even, that you're better than other perspectives. You see that fundamental conflict of interest in being a teacher? That in a way, you have to try to own truth in a way, right? Because if you don't own truth, that's an easy attack on you, is to say that you're false. So every teacher in a way is bought into trying to defend their role of being a teacher, which sets up a relation between the other as the student. And if you think you're the teacher who has the one right truth that goes beyond all other perspectives, that can actually be very delusional. Right? So if you're asking me to trust you there, I know what I am. I don't know what you are. I'm not going to put that much faith in you, actually. I would never do that. So you're asking me to put faith in you, more faith than I would put in myself. So I can't even do what I promise I will do for myself. What makes me think I should trust you to do something that you can't even fulfill when you're promising for yourself, and now all of a sudden you're better than me in something that cannot be demonstratively proven, like spirituality or philosophy even. And philosophy is not like chess, We're not going to be able to sit down and determine whether my ELO is better than yours or yours is better than mine. So when you're appealing to me, you're appealing to me. And I have to give you trust to say that you're better than me. And I realize just how precarious that is because I don't even have trust in myself to do what I promise I will do. So why would I give that to you? So, I mean, I get it, man. This stuff is... People are sneaky with words. And they're very defensive. And they're very persuasive. Right? Including yourself. You're very persuasive too. Oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. How much of that did you really do? Right? So once you understand how sneaky you are with yourself, you can have a better understanding of how sneaky other people are with you. And I will say one red flag, I think that's really a telltale, is when somebody claims to have the truth that goes beyond everybody else and God that goes beyond everything else. Okay, maybe they have that, but if the second element is that they're coming at it not from a humble perspective, but from like an arrogant perspective. Not from a perspective like, I want you to find truth in God and I want to help you see what I can see. No, it's like, I'm right, you're wrong, you're less developed than me, right? See, what you're doing there is you're discounting my subjective perspective, my divinity, my sovereignty. See, that's not reading the room. That's not reading the room from my perspective. Right? Of course, because you got to be the teacher. You're always in the teacher role, right? Because that's your job. But what if that's just like, it's an awful way to be, actually. I mean, I'm not a teacher, but I'm an expert in argument. In the legal profession, a lot of what I do is argue and writing. I'm an expert in reading people. I can see the power in everything, right? Everything that's said has a certain power weight to it and how it's presented. And one of the things I think that's lacking that teachers will never understand because they have to be the teacher is humility. You can't have humility. Just like a lawyer can't have impartiality. So I'm a paralegal. I mean, I'm not a lawyer. I'm so glad that I'm not, actually. But I'm still assigned a job to make an argument usually for one perspective versus the other, or to give an account of all perspectives sometimes too, so that we can weigh the strength and weaknesses of arguments. But I'm one step removed from needing to be the mouthpiece for a certain perspective. And I'm very good at determining when a mouthpiece for a certain perspective is being played. And teachers have to retain that relation with you. I'm superior to you. Your intuition's got to be wrong because for me to be a teacher to you, I got to have something to teach you. Or else what the fuck use am I? Right? So in a way, a teacher is controlling you. They have to control you unless they really do have something that they can teach you. So for example, if you're Magnus Carlsen and somebody comes to you and wants to learn chess from you, that's one thing. But then, see, Magnus Carlsen can prove to other people that he's a master at chess. But let's just say you're some spiritual guru online. Even if you're popular, does that mean that you have the truth? See, truth is not a game in the same way that chess is a game. So teachers, they have to, in a way, they have to fill in that gap. Like, unless they're at a university somewhere, but even then, that doesn't mean that you're the best at what you do. So for example, even if you're at a philosophy department at Stanford University, that doesn't mean that you're the best philosophy teacher in the world. There's plenty of philosophy teachers that were never professors, like Schopenhauer, Spinoza, and others. Not every great philosopher was a professor, or they may have been a teacher, but be careful with this teacher role, because it sets up a survival strategy. The way for you to make money as a teacher is to maintain that relation between teacher and student. So you've got to convince other people that they're deficient in relation to you. But then how do you prove that? Because your ability to make an argument? You know how many convoluted, complex arguments lose in the courts? I can't tell you how many times that a straightforward, simple, but poignant argument can destroy like a voluminous, with all these lists and points and all this crap. The judges can see right through that, right? But because we have law as a standard, everybody in the legal profession is sitting up against the law and the judgment of the fact finder and the legal finder, because the judges do have a certain amount of discretion too. So there's a little bit of psychology that goes into making a legal argument, but ultimately legal arguments turn on what the law means and says. The problem is that when you're dealing with spirituality and you're dealing with philosophy, there really is no law. There's no standard that everybody agrees on. And here's the thing that I don't understand, as a teacher, and I guess I do understand. I see why it wouldn't work. And this is one of the reasons why I don't want to be a teacher. Humility doesn't sell. But actually, humility is in your shadow as a teacher. So many teachers that I've come into contact with have just revolted me on some level. Even teachers that I like. To this day, almost every teacher that I've come into contact with has revolted me on some level. Especially spiritual teachers, philosophy teachers, self-help teachers. Why? Because their lack of humility. But I realize that's the reason why they're teachers and I'm not. That's the reason why they have 5 million subscribers and I have 100 subscribers. Because I make a point not to be that way. I don't have to be that way because I work in the legal profession. But in the legal profession, my job is to make arguments a lot of the time. And I'm very familiar with the social chess game of rhetorical power moves. Making a point, trying to be persuasive, trying to manipulate somebody to do something that you want them to do. I mean, would anybody buy anything from you if you're like, you know what? I don't even know if I want to sell something to you. I'm not even going to ask you whether you want to buy it or not. How many people do you think are going to come to you for something? The people who do are going to be, who knows, right? So we want to have more control over that as surviving systems. We want to be able to say, I want high quality people to relate with me, or I want people who have money to give me their money. But don't you see that sets up an obvious conflict of interest? Can you imagine how, would my clients pay me if I were to write a brief that said, Who knows who's right or wrong here? Who knows what the law means? Who knows what the judge should do? We don't even know what we're doing. Do you think anybody's going to pay me to write a brief that says that? Fuck no. Do you think anybody's going to pay you to be a teacher if they don't buy into some idea that you have something to teach them? That's a conflict of interest. Of course you don't like things that go against, right, what makes you able to perform that role. But that's your bias. And instead of trying to defend that, I think you should try to see the shadow of what you're doing and become an even better teacher by supporting or defending yourself to be a teacher, but at the same time acknowledging the conflicts of interest that come with being a teacher. Just like in the legal profession, I mean, I have to defend the idea that I'm making arguments for people that come into our office and I don't know who they are. I just make legal arguments. We determine what the client's position is. We determine what the law is. We determine what we can do to benefit our client who's paying us, and then we make a move. But I think somehow philosophy teachers or scientists or even spiritual people, they think they're above this kind of survival. No, if somebody's paying you, right, you're not being impartial. Unless you really have something, which I don't think you do. Because the thing is that whatever spiritual attainment you have, you can't give that to another person directly. And in fact, oftentimes, I remember there's a book called Mastery by George Leonard. And one of the pieces of advice that he gives, which I kind of disagree with, is that if you want to get better at something, find a teacher who knows more than you do. And I remember reading this book when I was 2015 when I was working on jazz. And I went and I started working with a jazz teacher. And I realized even though this guy knew how to play jazz much better than me, after paying $70 a lesson for I don't know how many lessons I had, maybe it was me, but for whatever reason, that could not be communicated that way. Just because somebody's really good at something doesn't mean that they really have the ability to teach. I remember this too when I was at UCLA. There were a lot of professors who were very, very good researchers, but they couldn't even speak English. And so you'd be sitting in a lecture hall with 500 people in this lecture hall. That may be an exaggeration. And this guy would be this little person standing behind a podium, and there'd be a blow up of him, and he'd be lecturing. You couldn't even understand what the fuck this guy was saying. You'd have to go to the TA sessions where the graduate students would try to break down what this guy was saying. Not all the time, but some of the time. So just because you're a really good researcher also doesn't mean that you're a good teacher. Just because you're a good teacher doesn't mean that you're very talented. You could just be very persuasive, right? Like a cult leader. Look at Charles Manson. You think Charles Manson was a UC Berkeley professor? Right? Obviously not. But he was very persuasive. He was in prison, right? Spent time in prison. He knew how to manipulate weaker people, women. He knew how to manipulate women. And I know this too, there's certain circumstances where there are these kind of just stupid guys that because they have this air of arrogance, they're able to keep this like one woman in check. And this woman is like basically being like gaslit, but she's like somehow believes that this guy is some kind of a godlike figure because the guy is arrogant as fuck. So I think this like playing around with arrogance, I have the truth, I have God, it's a way to control people as much as it is a way to help people. And sometimes it's really hard to discern that, because when somebody lacks humility, see, that's a red flag for me. And I said in my last video that you got to be careful of people who want to pretend like they're your friend. That's true. But also pay attention to your spidey sense, your intuition. Like, does this person ever admit any kind of weakness? Ever? Do they always have to be right? Is every argument ultimately leading in their favor? You don't have to be a rocket scientist here. And one of the things I want to teach you is that the truth is, fundamentally, that you as consciousness are over all of this crap. Everything is for your consideration, pro or con. You always have the ability to reconnoiter within yourself and find the peace and the sovereignty within yourself, and to put anybody who has anything to say to you in a second seat to you. No matter how slick they are with words. Some people are very persuasive. They're very articulate. Right? But articulation isn't enough for you to give up your sovereignty, your intuition. So, but realize too that when people are in a teacher role, don't hate these people. Don't argue with these people. My God, don't argue with these people. Unless you want to lose years of your life. Because they have a need to win. Don't argue with somebody who has more of a will to win than you do. Right? Don't fight somebody who has more of a will to win than you do. Chihuahuas understand this, right? You wonder why Chihuahuas are so aggressive? Like, big dogs are nice, right, usually. I mean, unless they're like a Doberman or something like that, named Duke. But let's just say it's like a little Chihuahua. Why do you think Chihuahuas are so aggressive? Because they're small and they're delicate, and they know that if they get the upper hand in advance and they let you know, I'm powerful and I will fuck you up, chances are you're going to be like, I'm not messing with this thing. So it's a defense. Like Trump, you think Trump is like this strong person? No. Like, Trump just knows how to bluster. He knows how to bluster. He knows how to do these little sniper attacks, kind of indirect, sneaky sniper attacks in a cultural way that disarms his opponents. I'm better than you. I have more power than you do. I have more people behind me than you. Don't fuck with me. You can sue me, you can prosecute me, and I'm still not going to go to jail. I'm not even going to be convicted, right? So I will say this. I still stand by my proposition that truth and God are in part rhetorical terms, and they're in part self-serving terms. I still stand by my thesis that the higher consciousness teacher, although I don't know how this teacher would ever even gain a following, would be to inspire each person to go on the personal development journey themselves. So you're a coach, not a teacher. Like, think about a coach, like on a basketball team. Not every coach was a great player. Although many coaches were players, they weren't always the best player. But they have an ability to bring out the best in the people who relate with them. And they have a vision for that person too. They have this intuition, this like big picture perspective. But a coach is not out there telling everybody, I'm Larry Bird, I'm Michael Jordan, I'm Magic Johnson. I'm better than these people, actually. I'm God on the basketball court, right? But see, that's what marketing does, though. Marketing tells you, hype yourself, right? Play into this fantasy that people want to have a shortcut to a quick result. This kind of stage orange marketing mentality. And also realize that what people discount is often not fairly delivered. Like, you can even think of this video. Look at me, right? Think of this video. I'm going to cut my own feet underneath me here and say, I want you to question everything I'm saying in this video. Maybe I'm just some guy who like is absolutely wrong. Like I'm some kind of a postmodernist, liberal from San Francisco, who has 100 subscribers on YouTube, who has sour grapes because he's not somebody who has 5 million subscribers on YouTube, who's living some kind of like little life as a senior litigation paralegal in San Francisco, who is trying to control his own perspective of reality to feel comfortable in the world. And you know what? My humility will tell you that I would be willing to explore that. But how many people do you think would be willing to explore their shadow issues? No, they don't even have any nuance in what they say. They're like, I have the absolute truth, you don't. I have the absolute God, you don't. I win, you lose. I'm superior, you're inferior. But see, I realize, you know what this is? Ultimately, I'm gonna tell you from my perspective. When I say ultimately, it's from my perspective. This is somebody who doesn't really understand the distinction between the absolute and the relative. I'm going to give you one pointer here. And I'm going to give myself this one pointer. Your dream character is not the absolute perspective. Your dream character is finite. And the fact that you don't behave that way, you act as though your dream character is infinite, that tells me, right, from my perspective, that you're not awake. See, you're telling me from your perspective that I'm not awake. But the thing is that if you were awake, you wouldn't need to be a certain way as a finite perspective. And even if you were, you would caveat it differently. You'd be like, okay, I'm a teacher, but I could be wrong, and it's up to you to, you'd have these like nuances about what you're doing. But no, you think that from a finite perspective that you're infinite, all wise, like you're God from a finite perspective. I don't even think anybody needs to try to disprove that. I think that's, and I don't want to be like sound crude, but that can be disproven in the same way that like when you encounter like a crazy person on the street, right? Or on the bus or something like that. And you're just like, eh. But the problem is that it's harder to do that when somebody has a way to defend themselves, especially in language. And they can be very persuasive through eloquence in some other way to try to get you to give up your sovereign perspective and do a mind substitution with them. See, that's what I want to say. Be careful of that one. Okay, friends? Thank you. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.